This is Think Out Loud on OPB. I'm Dave Miller. Oregon voters will weigh in on district attorney races in 15 counties next week. But you don't need to be able to predict the future to know how these races are going to go, because every one is uncontested. In fact, it's the first time in at least 26 years that there isn't a single contested race for the top local prosecutors in any county. That's according to Daniel Nichanian. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of Bolts, a nonprofit news site that covers criminal justice, voting rights, and democracy. He joins us now. It's great to have you on the show.
It's great to join you. Thanks for having me.
Now, to be clear, as you point out, it's not unusual for DA races to be uncontested. What is unusual is for all of them in a given cycle to be uncontested. So why, in general, do people not seem to want to challenge either a sitting DA or a hand-picked, say, chief deputy successor?
Right. There's a huge gap between just how important these offices are, how much power they yield, and just the lack of conversation, discussion when it comes to election time around who should be holding the office, what their record is, what their priorities are, what their philosophies are that they're going to bring to the office. Whatever your views, by the way, of what the approach should be. And this is something that is happening around the country. It's not unique to Oregon, but I've done this for a while, looking at the elections around the country. I had never quite seen a situation like in Oregon this week, this month, where literally all of the DA races, as you said, have no one running. One factor that I think is very interesting that people mention when you ask them, why aren't you running, or why aren't other attorneys running, is the fear of consequences if you run for prosecutor and lose. In many counties, even bigger counties, there's sort of an insular community of attorneys, prosecutors, and defense attorneys who could run, and you kind of run a professional risk if you run and lose. Imagine you're a line prosecutor, a staff prosecutor, and you challenge your boss and you lose. Are you going to be fired? Imagine you're a private practice attorney and you have a client and you've run against the incumbent DA and lost. Is your client going to suffer consequences, going to be punished? That's just one of the reasons which we should think about, because they obviously should be consequences to professional risk, but that's the kind of thing that attorneys are thinking about as they decide whether to run.
You talked to Spencer Todd, a public defender in Marion County who did run for DA 4 years ago. He lost to the incumbent, Paige Clarkson. She is retiring, and yet Spencer Todd chose not to run again. What did he tell you?
Right. This was one of the main races that happened in 2022 in Oregon, and it became a very negative race. Spencer Todd has worked as a public defender, a defense attorney, and one of the attacks that the incumbent prosecutor who he was challenging lobbied against him is that Spencer Todd, this is a mailer she sent, was palling around with convicted criminals. Now, it is obviously the job of a defense attorney as part of our constitutional system where everyone is entitled to legal representation as a right? It is a right of someone accused of a crime to have a defense attorney and for someone to represent them. So that provoked a lot of controversy in Marion County and around the state around whether that's a proper attack, what was happening there. But Spencer Todd told me, listen, like if you're a defense attorney thinking about running and you see something like that happen to someone else, it's going to give you second thought. These are not people who are used to the spotlight necessarily. And he told me that the toxicity level, as he said, being that high, it's something that most people aren't interested in. It's something that's going to give them second thoughts about even wanting to run in the first place.
Can you remind us the basics of what DAs do and specifically how much discretion they have and how much power they have?
They really have a lot of power to control so many aspects of the criminal legal system. Both actual power that they have legally, but also a lot of power they have because there's so little oversight and accountability on DAs in the first place that they really get away with a lot of things that are skirting the law at best. But when it comes to deciding what severity of charges to seek for certain categories of crime, how much prison to seek for certain categories on crime, whether to, for instance, have a policy of relying on the on testimony of police officers who have a record, a public record of having lied in other cases. There's all sorts of questions that prosecutors face. They also are very influential when it comes to state level policy. They often have the ear of lawmakers when there's a debate at the Capitol about whether to make penalties more harsh or whether, on the contrary, to pare back on incarceration levels, whether to increase the reliance on alternatives to incarceration. Those are debates where DAs often get involved, and whether there is a DA in the mix with a more progressive outlook, which is a lot more rare among DAs, can make a difference in those debates. And right now there's also a lot of debate around the country on what prosecutors should do with regards to ICE agents that are breaking the law in communities all around the country. And we have seen some DAs come together, in Pennsylvania, Texas, Virginia, form a coalition to discuss how to hold ICE agents accountable. There was no one from Oregon on that list, for instance, of prosecutors who are speaking to one another about what to do about ICE. And that's not a coincidence when you look at who is running for DA in Oregon and the sort of conversations happening around it.
One of the biggest themes of your recent article, and you touch on this, but I want to zero in on it now, is, in a sense, the lost opportunity that comes from uncontested DA's races. What doesn't get talked about? What doesn't get batted around in the press, in society, if or when DA candidates run unopposed?
I think that's a great question, and it's a hard one from the perspective of writing an article, because we're so used to writing about something happening that then to think about what it means to run an article about the absence of candidates, or how to even cover that, how to even make sure that the fact that an election is supposed to represent an opportunity for conversation, for accountability, for choices, and when that is deprived, when that ends because it's the end of the road, there's no one running, is there still a space for accountability? I think there's two things to keep in mind in answer to your question. One is that sometimes prosecutors faced allegations of misconduct, of having breached the law, of having done things that are improper, having violated the rights of defendants, there's all sorts of things there that an election is supposed to be an opportunity for accountability, and that is deprived when there's no one running. There's no choice there. The other sort of thing I will say, beyond the question of whether someone really broke the law or committed misconduct, is there choices to be made between an approach that we could maybe summarize as more of a criminal justice reform approach that maybe thinks that there's too much incarceration, that the job of a prosecutor is to think about that, to think about the racial disparities in the criminal legal system, and prosecutors who maybe use a more conventional approach, a more law and order approach. And those are choices that happen in the election. One former DA told me for this article that the criminal justice system is too often done in secret, unless and until there is an election. And so it's unfortunate that the Oregon residents are not going to have an opportunity for that conversation this cycle. And I think that's what I wanted to capture in the article.
12 of the 15 uncontested candidates are incumbents. They are running for re-election as DA. 3 of them are non-incumbents. You asked them for interviews. What happened?
Right. So none of the 3 candidates. Well, it's an interesting situation. Someone who does not have the position is going to become a DA, a powerful official, and they don't have an opponent. Let's ask them some questions still. Let's see what they have in mind as they enter the office. And none of the 3 candidates agreed to an interview. The only one who responded actually told me that he was only going to grant interview to local press, local media. Bolts is not an Oregon-specific publication, so in a way I can understand that. But I looked up whether he was granting interviews that were already available in the press locally in Oregon, and I didn't find that either. And I asked him whether he could point me towards any interview, and he didn't respond. So that's very an emblematic example of the conversation just ending, and officials sometimes taking it for granted that they can enter office and then stay there.
And just briefly, you zeroed in on the fact that this spate of uncontested DA races, it's happening after Oregon lawmakers recriminalize the possession of drugs and encourage counties to set up deflection programs. How do you see those two together?
Right. So that's interesting because specifically the law that you just mentioned, which as part of bringing back criminal penalties for drug possession, Oregon created programs meant to encourage counties, including giving grants to counties to set up treatment programs, set up opportunities for people to sort of be deflected away from the criminal legal system upon arrest. But as part of the law, and this really gets to what we're talking about, they empowered DAs in each county to make major decisions about the scope of the program, just who is even going to be eligible for this program. Are there thresholds? Are there prior offenses above which or under which you're not going to be even eligible to enter a treatment program as opposed to being sent towards a criminal record in prison? And so that's interesting because that's part of what the lawmakers are thinking about is this question of, oh, let's empower DAs to make those choices. DAs are elected officials. DAs are elected officials. And so the choices, as part of the system that's been designed in Oregon, should be made in part by the voters of the county. And that's where that conversation is not happening. For instance, that is a question I was hoping to ask the three non-incumbent DA candidates who are going to enter office very soon about what their views are of that program and the scope of it. But that is not a question that I got to ask them.
Daniel, thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Daniel Nichanian, founder and editor-in-chief of Bolts magazine. We end today with some of your voices. We talked yesterday about tinnitus, often described as a phantom ringing in the ears. We got some voicemails about your experiences with the condition.
Hi, Dave. My name is Linda. In 2009, I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease. One of the fun parts of Meniere's is that you almost always develop tinnitus, and I have had since then tinnitus that is ringing in my head anywhere from 1, 2, 3, or 4 tones at once, varying degrees of volumes. It is something that you cannot escape in any way, shape, or form, and it's amazing that your body just learns to adapt and cope, but it also changes everything about the way you live.
Hi, my name is Patricia, and I'm calling from Vancouver, Washington. I've had tinnitus since I was 13. It's usually a foggy ringing sound. Sometimes it's a pulsating sound, and sometimes it's very, very loud in that it makes me shake my head trying to get rid of it.
Hello, my name is Justin, and I'm living in Vancouver, Washington. And I've been suffering with tinnitus for about 15 years. I had what they called a sudden sensory hearing loss in my right ear, and I lost 100% of hearing within a split second. With the loss of hearing, I suffer from tinnitus, which exasperates in loud situations. You learn to deal with it, but it does diminish quality of life quite a bit. I've recently gotten hearing aids, and it helps some, but not completely.
Hi, my name is Barry, and I'm calling from Oregon. I recently was struck by it, and I say that because it just happened so suddenly. It has really changed my life considerably as I cannot sleep at night. The noise is so loud and almost intolerable. I can't enjoy the quiet now because the noise, the buzzing in my head. So now I have to have a noise within my home, music or something. And I have to turn it up a little louder just to kind of try to mask the sound. I have no idea what to do. And living like this, I'm very active in my life, and it's just changed the quality of my life tremendously.
Thanks very much to everybody who called in. Tomorrow on the show, Oregon State University researchers have developed a tool that could help reduce wildfire risk for vulnerable communities in the Northwest. It doesn't just take into account environmental factors. It also includes factors like poverty, age, and race. Thanks so much for tuning in to Think Out Loud on OPB and KLCC. I'm Dave Miller. We'll be back tomorrow.
Think Out Loud is supported by Steve and Jan Oliva, the Rose E. Tucker Charitable Trust, Michael, Kristen, Andrew Kern, and Anna Sanford, the Jackson Foundation, and the Kevin and Amy Constam Family Fund.